She stood at the entrance of the luxurious hotel, her arms crossed tightly and a frown etched deep on her face. It was a Wednesday afternoon, sun streaming through the tall glass windows, illuminating the vibrant lobby. Guests brushed past her, chatting and giggling, but she remained frozen in her spot. Clara was convinced she had seen it all during her time as a hostess, but this felt different. When the man walked in, a wave of whispers followed him. He wasn't wearing a suit or fancy shoes. In fact, his clothes looked a bit worn. He spotted the reception desk, took a deep breath as if summoning courage, and walked toward her. Clara could see the determination set in his jaw. "Excuse me," he said, his voice steady but low, like he was trying to gather all the strength he could muster. Clara asked, a tight edge to her voice. He hesitated, glancing down at his shoes, then back up. "No, but I was hoping to grab a bite to eat." Clara's eyes knit. She could tell he didn't belong here, not in her posh establishment where every guest was met with a smile and a pristine menu featuring entrees that could easily be mistaken for art. "No," she replied sharply. His shoulders fell, and for a moment she could almost see the flicker of defeat cross his face. But then his eyes hardened and he took a step forward, every inch of him demanding respect. "I'm just hungry." Clara could feel the pressure of her position weighing down on her. In the world of hospitality, her job was to keep everything running smoothly. A loose thread could unravel it all. "I said no," she reaffirmed, her tone now full of authority. He glanced around, taking in the glitzy decorations, the other well-dressed guests sitting in plush chairs, sipping cocktails and laughing. Something shifted in his eyes. It was as if he suddenly realized they were worlds apart. Still, he pressed on. Just then, a bellhop appeared, his crisp uniform and polished shoes catching Clara's attention. The bellhop strolled over, his presence radiating confidence. He looked straight at the man who had approached Clara, and with a calm voice said, "Welcome, sir." The tone in which it was said cut through her, a stark reminder that judgment often obscured the truth. The bellhop didn't see a ragged man, he saw a potential guest. The freeze in Clara's chest morphed into a warm flood of panic. She stammered, incredulity bubbling up inside her. The bellhop turned to her, his brow slightly raised, confusion flickering in his eyes. "This gentleman is more than welcome here." In that brief moment, Clara felt the heat in her cheeks. How could she have gotten it so wrong? The man's demeanor had shifted dramatically. With the bellhop's words, he stood taller, an unspoken dignity filling the space around him. "Wait," Clara called out, her voice rising a bit too loudly. But the bellhop simply gestured toward the dining area, a confident smile on his face. And just like that, the man followed, the echoes of their earlier standoff lingering in the air. Clara's heart raced, her mind flooded with conflicting thoughts. What had she done? The weight of her decisions pressed down as she watched the two walk away. The other guests had started to notice the scene unfolding, some glancing her way, brows furrowed. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She had a reputation to uphold. A strange pang of guilt settled in her stomach. How had she misjudged him so deeply? In that moment, she was fiercely aware of the role she played in the hospitality industry. Was she a protector, a guardian of the good taste, or a gatekeeper? As she stood there, Clara's mind raced through countless experiences. She remembered the stories of people she had turned away, not out of cruelty, but a misguided sense of duty. Their clothes, their hues, sometimes shaped her perception before she could even hear their voices. But the bellhop's polite address had thrown a wrench into her certainty. Why had she assumed that an unpolished exterior meant an unworthy individual? It was a question she couldn't ignore. The sound of clinking cutlery and laughter surrounded her, the bustling hotel feeling like a sorority, a space defined by appearances. She turned her gaze to the dining room, her heart pounding in rebellion against the confines of her prejudice. After a few moments of contemplation, she decided she needed to know more. Digging deep, she summoned her courage like the man had done upon entering. Clara smoothed her uniform, the fabric feeling tight against her chest. She needed to confront her assumptions. With a deep breath, she strode to the dining area, determined to speak with him, to apologize and understand. He sat by the window, the light catching the sharp angles of his face, giving him an almost ethereal glow. "Excuse me," she said, her voice steady as she approached. The man looked up, eyes widening momentarily as they locked onto her. "I'm sorry for how I treated you earlier," she admitted, feeling each word tumble out. He gestured towards the other chair. A small smile, tentative yet genuine, found a place on his face. "Thank you, I'm Jake," he replied, his voice a touch softer now, as if the earlier confrontation had faded into a distant memory. For a moment they both sat in silence, the noise of the restaurant wrapping around them like a warm blanket. Clara searched for the right words, the weight of her guilt heavy on her mind. "You know, I thought you were just." Jake raised an eyebrow and she quickly continued, "But that was so wrong of me." He leaned back, his expression unreadable. "I get it, people make judgments based on what they see." "I realize that now," Clara admitted, feeling a rush of vulnerability. "I love this job, but sometimes I think I lose sight of what it means." Jake nodded slowly, his eyes searching hers. "It took a lot to come in here today," she asked gently. He paused, considering his words. "I was just released from a job I worked for a decade. They let me go without warning, and I needed to feel a sense of normalcy again. I wanted Tears threatened to spring to Clara's eyes, how misjudged he had been and how blind she had been to the stories everyone carried. "You do matter," she whispered. She felt a connection growing between them as boundless as the silence that enveloped the dining room. They were now two souls peeling back layers of prejudice and shame, striving for understanding. Just then the bellhop who had earlier assisted Jake approached their table. He asked, glancing between Clara and Jake. "Yes, it's wonderful," Clara replied, grateful for the man's confidence in Jake. With a twinkle in his eye, the bellhop nodded. He turned to Jake. "You're a valued guest, sir." Clara processed the bellhop's words, letting them settle in her heart. Respect, kindness, and understanding, that's what mattered most. She still felt the grip of anxiety surrounding her responsibilities, but now there was something lighter fluttering within her. "We should create an environment for everyone," Clara said, turning back to Jake. He smiled warmly, enlightenment sparking in his eyes. "Yeah, it starts with small actions." Right then, the chatter around them faded away, leaving only the truth of their shared moment. Clara didn't just see a man, she saw a story filled with struggles and resilience. In that luxurious hotel filled with glamour and high expectations, two overlooked individuals found companionship amid their vulnerabilities. It was no longer about class or prestige, it was about heart. As the sun dipped further outside, something inside Clara shifted. She was just a hostess, yes, but today she would leave with much more than a fleeting duty. Today she had learned to look beyond appearances, to embrace every single person who walked through those doors with open arms. With every breath she took, Clara felt a layer of her perspective peel away, leaving space for compassion to bloom. All because she had refused to turn away, all because she had opened her heart to a powerful lesson. The grand hotel lobby buzzed with chatter, laughter, and the faint clinking of glasses. It was a luxurious place filled with polished marble floors and towering chandeliers. That day, Clara stood behind the hostess stand, her arms crossed defensively, scanning the room with a practiced gaze. She was the gatekeeper of charm and elegance, guiding patrons to their tables as if conducting a symphony. But just then, the heavy glass doors slid open, and in walked a man that made Clara's heart drop. His clothes were worn, frayed at the edges. He looked around, eyes wide with a mix of hope and nervousness, as if he had just entered another world entirely. It was clear from his appearance that he didn't belong here. "Excuse me," he murmured, walking toward Clara with a quiet determination that seemed to clash with the glitz around him. Taking a deep breath, Clara braced herself. She asked, her voice steady but laced with authority. She knew how to identify guests, she had to. A well-dressed crowd was all that mattered in this place. He hesitated, glancing down at the scuffed shoes he wore. "No, but I was hoping to grab something to eat." Clara's brows knitted together as she instinctively shook her head. A flicker of disappointment flashed across his face, making Clara's heart twinge. But the wall she had built around herself was high and full of invisible rules. "Just that this is a high-end establishment," she added, trying to justify her decision, but the tone in her voice felt sharp even to her ears. "Please," he replied, desperation creeping into his voice. "I'm really hungry." No one around them could hear his words, but a few guests began to look. Clara felt the weight of their stares and something inside her twisted, yet she stood firm, rooted in her duty. "I really can't do that," she insisted. Just then, a bellhop appeared, striding over with the kind of confident air that demanded respect. His crisp uniform gleamed, and as he approached the weary man, something changed in the atmosphere. "Good afternoon, sir. Welcome to our hotel," he said, his voice calm and assured. Clara froze, her heart racing. She gasped involuntarily, the word echoing through her. It wasn't just polite, it was powerful. The man straightened, surprise and dignity lighting up his face as if the bellhop had set him free. He started, but the bellhop cut him off smoothly. He extended an inviting hand, and the man nodded, finding his courage again. Clara felt as if the ground had shifted beneath her. The bellhop's gesture slammed into her, and she struggled to regain her composure. How could he possibly think this man was worthy of the title she had withheld? "Wait," she called out, but the words caught in her throat. The bellhop simply nodded toward the dining room, a confident smile revealing that he was sure she'd misjudged. Clara wanted to scream, to unravel the knot of misunderstanding, yet the bellhop had already guided the man away, confidently leading him toward the dining area, leaving Clara standing there, utterly bewildered. The buzz of the lobby faded into a dull roar as Clara's mind raced. Her heart thudded heavily in her chest as the moment replayed behind her eyes. In an instant, judgment turned to realization. She had let her assumptions dictate her actions. She could feel the stares from the other guests, whispers floated through the air, their expressions caught somewhere between curiosity and disdain for her. Caught in their scrutiny, she fought against the tightening sensation in her stomach. Clara could sense her authority slipping away like water through her fingers. A wave of guilt crashed into her, mixing with confusion. Why had she assumed he didn't belong? The bellhop had seen a person. She had seen a stranger defined by appearances. Maybe she was wrong, maybe wrong about everything she had ever thought regarding status and worth. The tension in her chest intensified as she watched the two men interact at a table near the window, where sunlight streamed in gently, illuminating their contrasting figures. Jake, she suddenly remembered his name from earlier, sat with a tentative smile. Did he feel welcomed? Did he see the change in the atmosphere as deeply as she did? Clara's thoughts spiraled as she recalled countless times she had nudged away people who didn't fit the mold, those who were too rough around the edges, too loud, or too different. She had constantly shrouded herself in authority, cloaked in the guise of professionalism. But what was professionalism without respect for every person that walked through those doors? Then in that moment, determination filled Clara. She couldn't let it end like this, not when she felt the burning ache of regret. The instinct to approach them surged, propelling her feet forward. She had to confront this misjudgment. She made her way through the crowd, past the materialistic chatter, past the laughter. Her heartbeat quickened as she closed the distance, her thoughts weaving together a thread of hope and redemption. Clearing her throat, she interrupted their conversation. "Excuse me," she began, and their heads turned toward her. She met Jake's eyes, searching for understanding. For a moment, everyone paused, the air thick with anticipation. "I'm Clara," she offered, fumbling for the right words, feeling exposed. "I let my assumptions guide my actions." "Thank you," Jake replied, his voice steady, but Clara could sense the uncertainty beneath. "It's common, you know, people often judge based on looks, but I didn't come here for a fight." "Right," she said, feeling the warmth spread across her cheeks. The weight of her error pressed heavily on her heart. "But every person deserves kindness, regardless of their appearance." She stood there, her vulnerability stretched bare. The bellhop approached again, overhearing the exchange. Clara held her breath, fearing he'd step in to protect Jake from her. Instead, he smiled warmly at both of them. "I'm glad you two are communicating. It's what we need more of in this world." She couldn't help but admire the way he had diffused the situation, effortlessly understanding the fragility of human interaction. After a moment, Jake nodded. "You're right, thank you for coming over." Her heart soared, his acceptance was a balm. She asked, daring the vulnerability to grow. "Sure," he said, the corner of his mouth twitching into a small smile. Sitting down at their table, Clara felt as though a bridge had formed between their worlds. She was both a hostess and a person seeking connection. They began to talk, sharing stories. Jake spoke of his past job, a company where he had invested years, only to be let go in an instant. "It feels like I lost a part of my identity," he admitted. Clara listened intently, wrapping her mind around the painful lessons he had learned. She began to share her own struggles, how she had spent years adhering to a facade of control, often at the expense of others' truths. It didn't take long for the conversation to twist into a deep reflection on their lives, dreams, and fears. This new sharing had them both leaning forward, the walls they had each built beginning to crumble. The bellhop returned, pouring water into their glasses and shooting Clara a knowing smile. She felt gratitude swell within her. This encounter had transformed her, the moment had unraveled so much. Jake asked with a hint of playfulness. Clara laughed softly. "Just the way you see through people," he continued. They exchanged playful banter, the mood slowly lifting as laughter echoed around their table. Clara felt a catharsis washing over her. Compassion had crept into her heart, stitching together the fabric of her experience. As the sunlight rays began to fade, Clara glanced around the room and noticed the transformation in the way people interacted with Jake. Heads turned, smiles were exchanged. Clara recognized something sacred in what had unfolded. A new understanding had taken root. The bellhop returned once more, this time with a small dessert plate meant for celebration. "Compliments of management," he said with a wink, setting the plate between them. Clara's heart swelled with a sense of gratitude both for the bellhop's kindness and Jake's willingness to share his story. In that moment, she realized something profound. Each person who walked through those grand doors carried a universe of stories, battles, and dreams. As she shared dessert with Jake, laughter filling the air and warmth expanding between them, Clara made a silent vow. In her heart, she knew that she would never again underestimate the power of kindness or the importance of seeing beyond the surface. Here in this luxurious hotel, beneath the opulence, was a place for real connection, built not on glitter but on understanding and respect. And as Jake smiled back at her, she felt the beginning of a friendship that could change everything. In that instant, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant hues. Their laughter melded with the whispers of an awakening, carried forward by the promise of a better tomorrow. Clara felt alive, not just as a hostess, but as a human, finally ready to welcome everyone with open arms. She stood at the entrance of the upscale restaurant, arms crossed, lips pursed. The grand lobby shimmered with promise crystal chandeliers danced above her head, reflecting splashes of golden light onto the marble floor. It was a world of elegance, of effortless charm, where well-dressed patrons gathered, sipping wine and exchanging laughter like currency. But Clara, the hostess, felt the weight of her responsibilities heavy on her shoulders, and then he walked in. The man was an anomaly amid the opulence, dressed in a faded sweater and worn jeans. His shoelaces were untied, and he had a weary look about him, as if he had just crossed an invisible line from one world to another. He hesitated at the entrance, scanning the room with wide eyes that flashed with longing. Clara shifted uncomfortably, a knot tightening in her stomach as she recognized the tension that came with her role. He approached the hostess stand, determination etched into his features, but there was vulnerability in the way he carried himself. Clara replied, her tone clipped. It was a routine question, the kind that set the tone for every interaction that followed. He hesitated. "No, but I'm willing to wait," he replied, almost pleading, hope shimmering in his voice. "No, I'm sorry," she said quickly, shaking her head. "We can't seat anyone who's not made a reservation." His face fell, disappointment replacing the flicker of hope. Clara felt the moment hang in the air, heavy with unspoken words. She noticed the way he glanced around at the other diners, dressed impeccably and sipping their drinks without a care. The contrast was stark, and she felt a rush of discomfort flood through her. "Please, I just want to eat something." "It's been a long day," he persisted, pleading now, desperation creeping into his voice. Clara's voice trailed off, her resolve firm but her heart beginning to soften. Part of her wanted to say yes, couldn't she bend the rules just a little bit? But just as she opened her mouth to reconsider, a bellhop came sauntering over, impeccably polished in his crisp uniform. A look of confidence radiated from him, as if every stride echoed the assurance of his position. The bellhop exclaimed, turning to the man who had approached Clara. Clara's heart stopped. The man straightened, all traces of defeat disappearing in an instant. "I'm just looking to get something to eat," he stammered, but the air was different now. The bellhop continued, making a gesture toward the dining room. "I'd be happy to assist you." In that heartbeat, the atmosphere shifted. Clara stood frozen, mouth slightly agape. It was a small word, but it carried weight, gravity that she hadn't given the man credit for. Suddenly, he wasn't just a scruffy character stumbling into a high-end restaurant. He was someone deserving respect. Her pulse raced as disbelief and confusion coursed through her. She called out, her voice cutting through the air, jagged and urgent. The bellhop paused, turning slightly, a quizzical expression crossing his face. Clara could barely find the words. "He doesn't have a reservation," she stammered, trying to grasp at her authority, but the bellhop's calm demeanor made her question herself. The man hesitated, looking between Clara and the bellhop, who wore a smile that radiated genuine warmth. The confidence in the bellhop's presence was disarming, and Clara felt her grip on the situation start to slip away. "Everyone deserves a seat," the bellhop said simply, redirecting his attention back to the man. Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks. How could he see something in this man that she had refused to acknowledge? A moment stretched like eternity, the silence amplifying the wrongness of her actions. A crowd of elegantly dressed guests looked on, eyebrows raised and whispers stirring. The man nodded slowly, taking a step forward as if buoyed by the bellhop's words. Clara's heart sank. What had she done? What had she missed? Just then, she recalled her own biases, the invisible walls built against those who didn't fit neatly into her category of worth. As the bellhop led the man away, Clara watched them move toward a table by the window. Just like that, the man transformed from an unwelcome guest into someone deserving of a place in this world. Clara felt disoriented, the weight of judgment evident in her own heart. The laughter around her continued, but it felt muffled, distant. She stood rooted in place, a tempest of guilt and confusion swirling inside her. Her pulse quickened, but part of her was paralyzed. Had she really allowed assumptions to dictate her actions? She glanced around the restaurant, noticing the way people looked at the man with skepticism, the way she had done just moments before. It shook something inside Clara. With a deep breath, she steeled herself to act. This wasn't just about a man seeking food, it was about dismantling her own biases. She approached the table where the man sat, suddenly regretting every moment of negligence she had shown. He was studying the menu, but his face betrayed hints of uncertainty. Clara approached cautiously, vulnerability wading through her thoughts. "Excuse me," she said, and he looked up, a mix of surprise and apprehension in his eyes. "I'm sure," he replied, somewhat baffled but not unwelcoming. "I want to apologize for how I treated you earlier," Clara began, her voice unsteady. "I let my assumptions about appearances dictate my actions." He met her gaze, and for a moment they were suspended in a shared understanding. The awkwardness faded, replaced by something much deeper. "Thank you," he replied simply, but Clara could tell he felt the weight of the moment too. "I'm Clara," she said, offering her hand, and he took it, his grip warm and steady. "Jake," he introduced himself, and there was a flicker of relief in his eyes. The exact nature of their encounter began to shift, the tension untethering with each word spoken. "This place is known for its food," Clara said, trying to lighten the mood. A faint smile broke on Jake's face. Clara inhaled sharply. What a raw truth. How often had she judged others based on superficial criteria? "I get it. It's easy to forget that everyone has a story." Jake nodded solemnly as he began to share his own background. He talked about how he lost his job recently and how all of it felt privileged yet terrifying at the same time. The world he once occupied began to seem distant and unreachable. Clara felt a tug of empathy. "I've spent so much time focusing on the surface of things," she said. "Doesn't matter what you wear," Jake replied, his voice steady. That struck a chord within Clara. She remembered countless interactions where she let preconceived notions dictate her actions. This beautiful restaurant, buzzing with life and laughter, had made her lose sight. Feeling a surge of sincerity, she leaned in closer. "Can I help?" Jake raised an eyebrow, his demeanor shifting. You don't have to, I just wanted a bite to eat. Please, Clara insisted, her heart swelling with the urge to serve not just food but dignity. With a firm nod, Jake relented, laughter bubbling in his chest. Clara rose, newly empowered, the bellhop catching her gaze as she approached the kitchen. There was an unspoken understanding between them, a recognition that lingered in the air. She felt gratitude swell toward him for having seen beyond the surface. After relaying an order to the chef, she returned with a plate of exquisite food, a blend of flavors that spoke to the heart of the restaurant. She set it down in front of Jake, excitement shimmering in her eyes. As he took the first bite, his eyes lit up and a smile broke across his face, genuine and carefree. "This is incredible," he exclaimed between mouthfuls. Clara couldn't help but grin. There it was, the power of good food, good company, and the bridge they were building together. What had begun as a moment steeped in judgment had transformed into an exchange filled with camaraderie and understanding. With every bite Jake took, Clara felt her connection with him solidify, a fragile line of trust drawn between two people from completely different worlds. They swapped stories, the sun rising and setting outside the window, life weaving through their interactions. The bellhop continued to check in with them, and Clara couldn't help but feel a burgeoning sense of hope. It became less about status and more about story, less about wealth and more about worth. By the time dessert arrived, they were deep in conversation, exploring the intricacies of their lives. Jake shared dreams he once had, aspirations that, although distant, still warmed him from within. Clara recounted her own struggles, her frustrations with the constraints of her job, the biases that crept in unnoticed. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow through the window, Clara felt a renewed sense of purpose. The restaurant was no longer simply a backdrop, it was alive with the buzzing spirit of connection. "I hope to see you back here again," Clara said, her voice laden with sincerity. "Only if you're here," Jake replied, laughter lighting up his face, something she knew would resonate beyond the surface. As they finished their meal, there was a palpable shift within Clara. She understood now that the hospitality industry was about more than just serving food. It was about seeing people for who they are and welcoming every story with open arms. In that cozy corner, with laughter and warmth cradling them, they forged a friendship born from an unguarded moment. And as the colors of the sunset faded into dusk, Clara felt a whisper of hope settle comfortably within her heart, a persistent reminder that every person deserves a seat at the table, no matter their appearance or story. She refused to seat him, her eyes narrowing with judgment as he approached the hostess stand. The gleaming marble floors of the luxury hotel lobby framed the scene, sunlight streaming through tall glass windows, illuminating the lavish decor and the elegantly dressed guests inside. His worn jeans and scuffed shoes stood in stark contrast to the world around him. Clara, the hostess, felt an urgency to protect the exclusivity of this place, a duty that weighed heavy on her shoulders. She asked, her tone clipped. He paused, glancing down as if searching for the words that would escape him. "No, but I promise I can pay." Clara shook her head, a practiced response rolling off her tongue. "I'm sorry, but we can't seat anyone without a reservation." Disappointment crossed his face, a flicker of vulnerability that nearly melted her cold resolve. The chaos of laughter and clinking glasses surrounded them, but in that moment everything else faded. Her heart weighed heavy with his longing. "Please," he implored, "just one meal." But just then a bellhop appeared, striding across the lobby with purpose. He stood tall in his crisp uniform, exuding confidence. The bellhop said, addressing the man with a warmth that Clara had failed to extend. "I just wanted to," the man started, but the bellhop cut him off with a reassuring smile. "Right this way, sir," he said, gesturing toward the dining area. The way he said "sir" sent Clara's mind racing. This was not just a scruffy stranger, he was worthy of respect. Her heart raced as she gasped, disbelief washing over her. She called out, her voice urgent as she tried to reclaim control. The bellhop turned to her, his brow arched in confusion. "Everyone deserves a seat," he replied simply, turning back to the man and leading him away. The confidence radiating from the bellhop made Clara feel small, her authority slipping away in moments. As they walked toward the dining room, Clara's thoughts tangled, spiraling into a whirlwind of guilt and introspection. How had she let her bias blind her? The man she had dismissed so easily was deserving of the same kindness afforded to anyone else in this grand establishment. Clara felt the weight of other guests' judgment bearing down on her. Whispers and glances made her acutely aware of her misstep. The bellhop's simple act of kindness had illuminated her prejudice, throwing it into sharp relief. She watched Jake. She suddenly realized the man's name sit down at the table, the way he instinctively straightened his posture as if reclaiming a part of himself. He suddenly appeared brighter, filled with a buoyant light, as if the bellhop's acknowledgement had lifted a heavy curtain. Determination surged within Clara. She could not let this moment slip by. Taking a deep breath, she stepped from behind her stand, weaving her way through scattered tables and guests. She had to confront her mistake. Approaching Jake's table, she hesitated for a moment, guilt washing over her, but she had to make it right. "Excuse me," she began, her voice wavering. His expression was one of surprise, but he nodded, inviting her in. "Sure," he replied cautiously, as if gauging her intentions. "I'm Clara," she said, extending her hand. The warmth of his grip reminded her that under the veneer of social structures, they were both just people seeking connection. "Jake," he introduced himself, an edge of curiosity in his voice. Clara plunged ahead. "I just wanted to apologize for how I treated you earlier. I let my assumptions get in the way." Jake regarded her quietly, the surprise in his eyes softening into something more profound. "Thank you, most people wouldn't have come over." "I can't let it go," Clara confessed, her heart racing. "You deserve better than that." A glimmer of understanding passed between them, and Clara felt the tentative thread of connection beginning to weave itself together. Jake sighed, his shoulders relaxing. "I get it." His words carried the weight of experience, reflecting a depth that resonated with Clara. "I was wrong to assume," she admitted, heat radiating through her cheeks. The bellhop reappeared, checking on them with genuine interest. Clara felt gratitude for the way he had treated Jake, his kind demeanor becoming a bridge in a moment of disconnect. "You're doing great," he said to Clara, sensing her urgency to connect. Jake nodded in agreement. "Exactly, we all have our battles, don't we? I was just laid off." Carrying the narrative further, he shared tales of his past job years spent investing in a company, only to be discarded like unwanted baggage. Clara felt her heart ache for him. "I can't even imagine how that feels," she said softly. "It's disorienting," Jake replied, his voice tinged with regret. Clara's heart swelled with compassion. The lavishness of the room, the laughter at other tables, faded as she focused on his story. "But you're still here." He met her gaze, sincerity etched across his features. "Sometimes it takes someone to remind you of that." Clara felt her spirit lift in the shared vulnerability. She realized their encounter was more than just an apology. It was a profound moment of connection and understanding that transcended judgment and assumptions. As they continued to talk, laughter broke the air and the warmth between them began to grow. The bellhop returned, hanging around for a moment, and Clara smiled at him gratefully. He asked, his demeanor relaxed, as if he were part of a shared camaraderie they all belonged to. "Just the world's best dessert," Clara said playfully. With a grin, the bellhop disappeared toward the kitchen, and Clara turned back to Jake, their conversation flowing like a gentle river. They swapped stories about failures and triumphs, how they were constantly trying to define themselves in a world that often pushed them to the margins. "You know, there's so much pressure to conform," Clara shared, her voice growing passionate. "Exactly," Jake agreed, leaning closer with enthusiasm. "Just because you wear a uniform or a suit doesn't make you more important. We all have an equal right to be here." The meal arrived in beautiful splendor, an artistic presentation that captured the essence of culinary delight. Clara and Jake dug into their plates, sharing bites and suggestions, engaged in an intimate exchange. Their laughter resonated through the once formal restaurant, drawing the attention of other guests who couldn't ignore the light they radiated. Clara felt her own walls crumbling, replaced by a friendship that was just beginning to blossom. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the dining room, Jake leaned back, satisfaction written all over his face. "You know, I almost didn't come in here today." Clara's gaze softened. "I'm glad you didn't." "Likewise," he said, genuine warmth flooding his tone. "I appreciated the honesty." The bellhop returned with dessert, placing a stunning plate of delicate pastries before them. As he set it down, a mischievous smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. As Jake took a bite, his eyes lit up. He exclaimed. Clara was enthralled, not just by the culinary delight, but by the joy that had emerged between them. "For once, it feels good to be seen," he said, savoring the moment. Clara nodded, feeling the weight of her earlier actions lift away. "I'll keep that in mind for the future," she promised him, her heart swelling with a desire to create unity. As they shared the last of the dessert, laughter erupted between them, mingling with the sounds of the restaurant. Jake's smile was infectious, a beacon of hope. By the time their meal concluded, the atmosphere had transformed entirely. Clara was no longer just a hostess, she was a participant in an intimate story of resilience and redemption. She had learned to peel back the layers of her own biases, embracing the dance of human connection. "I'd love to see you again," Clara said, her heart racing at the thought. "Maybe we can meet for coffee." Jake grinned, the warmth radiating between them palpable. "That sounds amazing." As they exchanged phone numbers, Clara looked around, taking in the beautiful chaos of the restaurant. All the decor that had once seemed so important faded into the background, making room for real human connection. In that moment, Clara made a vow to herself. She wouldn't just be a gatekeeper determining who belonged based on appearance. She would embrace every story, every person, welcoming them with open arms. The bellhop reappeared, and Clara could see pride blossoming in his eyes. He had been a catalyst for change today. "You two seem to have had a fantastic meal. I'm glad to hear it," he said, beaming. "Thanks to you," Clara replied, emotion swelling in her chest. As Jake and Clara left the restaurant, the sun had set completely, but the warmth of their budding friendship would resonate long after. In an upscale hotel where judgment once reigned, A beautiful connection had emerged, a reminder that empathy could break down barriers, that everyone, no matter their exterior, deserved a chance. Walking side by side, Clara and Jake stepped into the world outside, ready to embrace it with open hearts. A small act of kindness had ignited a flame of compassion that neither of them would ever forget. And as they stepped into the night, Clara felt a lightness in her spirit, a promise of friendship, understanding, and acceptance waiting for her just beyond the horizon. She refused to seat him, her lips pressed into a thin line of disdain as he approached the hostess stand. The gleaming lobby of the upscale restaurant buzzed with chatter, laughter, and the clinking of fine china, a world draped in elegance and poised sophistication. Clara, the hostess, stood tall, anchored by her role in this polished environment. She scanned the room, ensuring everything was orderly, until her attention landed on him. Wore a faded t-shirt and worn-out jeans, his hair tousled and unkempt. Distinctly out of place, he paused at the entrance, swallowing hard as if entering this realm of luxury was a daunting task. Clara felt a pinch of discomfort in her gut. How could someone like him even think about stepping in here? She asked, her voice clipped and too rehearsed, as if reading from a script she had repeated countless times. "No," he replied, almost hesitantly, "but I was hoping to get a table for one." Clara's brow furrowed. "I'm sorry, but we can't seat anyone who doesn't have a reservation." Her tone was firm, a protective afterthought wrapped in her obligation to uphold the standards of the establishment. His shoulders slumped, disappointment etched across his features. "I understand, I just thought." He trailed off, glancing down at his shoes, the rejection hanging heavy in the air. Before Clara could reconsider, a bellhop glided into view, his crisp uniform gleaming under the chandelier light. He radiated confidence, a knowing smile that suggested he was used to addressing every guest with grace. The bellhop declared, turning straight to the man who had approached Clara. Clara gasped, feeling the weight of those two words hang in the atmosphere. It wasn't just a title, it was recognition. The instant the bellhop had spoken, the man's demeanor shifted, standing a little taller, the flicker of hope igniting behind his eyes. I was just trying to," the man began, but the bellhop cut him off, gesturing toward the dining area. He said, leading the man away with an assured air. Clara felt the sudden shift in the air, a rush of disbelief washing over her. She called after them, her voice almost frantic as she attempted to regain control of the situation. The bellhop turned back, his brow slightly raised, confusion dancing across his features. "Everyone deserves a seat," he replied, a simple but profound statement that turned Clara's world upside down. In that moment, as they walked away, Clara felt the enormity of her actions pressing heavily upon her chest. She had just judged someone based on their appearance without a second thought. The bellhop's polite address had thrown her, forcing her to confront the biases she thought she had buried deep down. As she stood there, frozen, whispers and glances from the other guests pricked at her. This wasn't how she had envisioned her evening. She had been strict, maintaining the integrity of the restaurant, but the truth spiraled around her like a storm. It wasn't the restaurant's prestige that mattered, it was the people who walked through the doors. Clara frowned as she watched the man interact with the bellhop, gratitude washing over him in the slightest smile. The juxtaposition struck her. He had transformed from a disregarded stranger to someone deserving of respect, all due to a couple of simple words. Suddenly, everything around her felt off balance. The elegant ambience, the laughter ringing through the air, faded as she became hyper-aware of the judgment she had cast. The weight of her bias settled in heavy knots in her stomach. She felt a sense of urgency, as if she needed to act before this moment slipped away. Gathering her courage, Clara stepped away from the hostess stand, weaving through the bustling crowd. Each step felt heavy, charged with intention. She had rejected this man not just from a table, but from the very concept of belonging. When she reached the table where he sat, she took a deep breath, guilt swelling within her. "Excuse me," Clara said, and the man looked up, surprise written all over his face. "I'm really sorry for how I treated you earlier," she continued, the sincerity bursting forth. "I let my assumptions blind me to your worth." He blinked, taken aback, but a softening light flickered in his eyes. "Thank you for saying that." Clara felt the tension shift, a newfound connection blossoming between them. "I want to get to know you," she said, vulnerability bleeding through her words. "Jake," he replied, the tension beginning to break. "And you're right." As they spoke, Clara realized the depth behind his eyes. Here was a man who had faced challenges, someone who had a story worth hearing. "I understand that people make judgments based on appearances," she said, her heart racing. In that moment, the bellhop reappeared, his presence radiating warmth. He inquired, assessing the situation with keen understanding. "I'd like to serve him," Clara said, her voice growing steady with purpose. Jake shot her a grateful look, that flicker of hope returning for him. The bellhop nodded, a smile playing at the corners of his lips. "Absolutely." As the bellhop walked away, Clara turned back to Jake, the initial hesitation fading. "You know, it can be easy to overlook the humanity in others." "Most people do," Jake replied, leaning back slightly, reflecting her earnestness with his own. Clara couldn't help but smile, the weight in her heart lifting. They continued to talk, laughter weaving through their conversation as the restaurant buzzed around them. Each moment brought a new layer of understanding, unraveling the rigid walls built on assumptions. With each story Jake shared, Clara felt their bond deepen. He spoke of his struggles, the job he had lost, the efforts he had made just to get back on his feet. "I thought this would be a reminder of what I can't have," he admitted, his eyes reflecting equal parts vulnerability and strength. "I can't imagine how hard that must be. I spend my days assisting well-dressed patrons, forgetting that everyone has battles," Clara said, her voice thick with emotion. Their conversation flowed seamlessly, and soon Jake was sharing stories of times he had been helped by others. "There were a couple of kind souls along the way," he said softly. "Moments where a smile or a few kind words went a long way." As the bellhop returned with a beautifully arranged plate filled with mouth-watering dishes, Clara felt gratitude surge in her heart. She beamed at Jake as he dug in, his face lighting up with delight. He said, his eyes widening at the culinary masterpiece before him. "I'm glad to hear that. You deserve every bit of it," Clara replied, watching him savor each bite. The walls between them had crumbled completely. As they shared the meal, the atmosphere around them began to shift. Other guests, once captivated by their own stories and conversations, now echoed laughter and shared glances with Clara and Jake. The restaurant's energy transformed, infused with camaraderie and warmth. "I can't believe how quickly things have changed," Jake said, leaning back in his chair, solace spilling from his demeanor. "I was just looking for food and now," Clara mused, her heart swelling. In that moment of shared laughter and understanding, Clara recognized that her small actions could have major implications. She had the power to change perceptions, to challenge preconceived ideas. "Thank you for coming over and for the meal," Jake said sincerely. Clara felt a warmth wash over her, a reminder of the human experience that tied them all together. "We're all just looking for a seat at the table," she said softly, the truth resonating deeply. Jack nodded, a profound understanding settling between them. This was more than just about dinner. As they wrapped up their meal, Clara felt a sense of relief wash over her. She had let go of her judgments, something that had weighed her down for far too long. Now she saw Jake not just as a man in tattered clothes, but as a unique story unfolding before her. Jake glanced at the clock as they finished up, suddenly realizing the time. "I'd love to stay in touch," Clara said, a spark of connection surging between them. Jake smiled, gratitude lighting up his features. "I'd like that." As they exchanged contact information, a wave of optimism settled over Clara. The encounter had changed her perspective, igniting a desire to embrace compassion even more deeply. As they stepped out of the restaurant, the world outside buzzed with life. The noise, the sights, even the smells of the street became a tapestry of shared experiences. The city had opened up before them, a canvas full of potential. "In a way, I'm thankful for what happened tonight," Jake said, glancing at Clara. Clara couldn't help but grin, her heart warmed by his words. As Clara and Jake parted ways, a connection had been forged, one built on kindness and understanding. Tonight, they both learned that appearances could be deceiving, and that a simple act of compassion could unravel a tightly wound knot of preconceived notions. As they disappeared into the night, both Clara and Jake carried a piece of each other forward, promised to hold space for one another, to share stories, and to embrace the warmth of humanity in all its forms. It was clear that sometimes the unexpected challenges would yield the most beautiful moments, echoing through their lives long after the night had ended. She refused to seat him. The words hung in the air, thick with consequence, as Clara, the hostess, glanced at the man standing before her. He looked out of place, a stark contrast to the elegant surroundings of the upscale restaurant. The gleaming chandeliers sparkled above, reflecting the laughter and chatter that filled the grand lobby, creating an atmosphere of exclusivity and charm. But there he stood, wearing scuffed shoes and a tattered jacket, hope mixed with anxiety written across his face. She asked, her voice smooth and authoritative, trained to repel any intruders into this polished world. He hesitated, his gaze dropping to the marble floor. "No, but I can pay," he said, his words barely above a whisper. The pleading tone in his voice caught Clara off guard, tugging at something deep within her. "I'm really sorry, but we can't seat anyone who doesn't have a reservation. It's a busy night," Clara replied, her sentence rehearsed, a barrier to prevent chaos from spilling through the elegant door. He sighed, shoulders slumping as the disappointment washed over him. "I just wanted to have a meal, just one meal," he replied, desperation creeping into his voice again. But before Clara could reassess the situation, a bellhop appeared, striding toward them with the confidence of someone accustomed to interacting with the high and mighty. His polished shoes clicked against the floor as he approached, radiating assurance. The bellhop exclaimed, turning directly to the man. Clara's heart stopped, the word "sir" struck like a lightning bolt, reverberating through her. Suddenly, the man transformed from a mere figure in worn clothing to someone worthy of respect. A realization washed over Clara, churning her insides. Where had she drawn the line? Did she really believe his worth was tied to his clothes? I just wanted to," the man started, but the bellhop interrupted him. He said, his smile radiant, sweeping aside Clara's disbelief. The bellhop's voice carried authority and kindness, leaving Clara rooted in place while the man followed him, the shimmer in his eyes returning. Clara called out, urgency laced in her voice. The bellhop turned with an eyebrow raised, confusion creeping across his face. "Everyone deserves a seat," he stated firmly, then continued leading the man away. As they walked towards the dining room, Clara felt a rush of panic mixed with shame. She had allowed her assumptions to dictate her actions, and the bellhop's simple yet powerful statement echoed in her mind, striking at the core of her beliefs. Why had she so easily dismissed this man? Other guests began to cast judging glances in Clara's direction, whispers swirling around her. The weight of their scrutiny settled on her and Clara's stomach churned. How many times had she turned others away, convinced they didn't belong? The contrast between her emotions and the lively ambience of the restaurant filled her with dissonance. Watching the man smile as he took his seat, she felt a shift in the air. He had gone from a person she had labeled without thought to someone deserving of kindness and respect. The bellhop had recognized that simple humanity in him while Clara had fallen short. She took a deep breath, as if steeling herself for an inner battle. This wouldn't be the end. She needed to confront her own perceptions and make things right. Taking a step forward, she pushed through the bustling crowd toward the dining room. "Excuse me," she said as she approached the table where the man sat. He looked up, surprise and caution crossing his face. Sure," he replied, uncertainty clear in his voice, but there was also a flicker of curiosity. "I'm Clara," she introduced herself, extending her hand. There was something about the warmth of his grip that felt grounding. "Jake," he said, hesitant but polite. "Listen, I want to apologize for how I treated you earlier," Clara said, her voice steady yet soft. "I let my biases cloud my judgment." Jake blinked at her, seeming to sense the sincerity behind her words. "Most people wouldn't even have the guts to come over," he said, woven with disbelief. Their conversation began to flow, each word peeling back layers of guardedness. Clara felt a spark ignite between them, the unspoken acknowledgement that they were more than their appearances. "I never thought I'd find myself here tonight," Jake admitted, glancing around the lavish dining room. Clara couldn't help but feel a sense of kinship forming. "What brought you in?" Jake sighed, his expression growing thoughtful. "I lost my job recently. I've been looking for work, but for some reason I couldn't shake the feeling of being invisible." Her heart ached for him. "I can't imagine how tough that must be." As Jake spoke, Clara absorbed his honesty. She was realizing how deeply people carry their stories, how many others had slipped through the cracks simply because of rigid assumptions. Just then the bellhop returned, a charming smile lighting up his face as he approached their table. He asked, his gaze shifting between them, genuinely interested. "It's wonderful now," Clara replied, gratitude brightening her tone. "I'm glad you came over." Jake chimed in, his expression matching Clara's warmth. "Seriously, thank you." The bellhop beamed, clearly encouraged. "Everyone deserves respect," he said simply. Clara nodded, her heart swelling with appreciation. In that moment it felt as if they were combating the very biases that had once clouded her judgment. As the bellhop walked away, Clara turned back to Jake, unable to hide the excitement bubbling within her. "I'd love to hear more about you, your interests, your dreams." Jake seemed taken aback, a smile dawning on his face. "Well, I've always been passionate about writing," he shared, an ember igniting in his voice. "But work took over my life." "Clara prompted," he exclaimed. Her heart raced at the sound of his enthusiasm. "You should. Maybe this experience is a sign to rediscover that passion. You found the courage to come here after all." Jake chuckled lightly, his eyes gleaming with ideas. "You know, you're right." Their conversation continued, the air around them crackling with warmth. Clara shared her own challenges, the struggles of living in a world bound tightly by expectations. "Sometimes I feel pressure to uphold a certain image," she confessed. Jake said, nodding appreciatively. As they shared laughter and stories, the restaurant transformed around them, the initial judgments fading into nothingness. Clara realized they were becoming allies, each story a thread weaving them together in a larger tapestry of human experience. Just then their meal arrived, the presentation stunning in its artistry. Jake's eyes widened in awe. "I can't remember the last time I got to sit down for something this special," he said, taking in the culinary masterpiece. "This is a celebration," Clara said cheerfully. With each bite they savored the flavors, delight filling the space between them. Clara noticed the way Jake's demeanor shifted, joy illuminating his face. The weight he had carried with him began to dissipate, revealing the man he was beneath the surface. As they finished their meal, the sun dipped lower outside, casting warm hues into the room. "You know, I arrived here feeling invisible, yet you gave me your time, your attention," Jake said softly. Clara smiled, feeling a tether form between them, a connection that transcended the restaurant's lavish decor. With laughter echoing around them, a clear sense of understanding blossomed. They could be more than just people passing through each other's lives. They could uplift each other through shared experiences. As they wrapped up their conversation, Clara felt a sense of satisfaction swelling within her. This was more than just an interaction. This was a turning point. Their lives had intertwined, setting forth something meaningful. Jake glanced at the time and knew it was getting late. "I should probably head out soon," he said, his voice tinged with reluctance. "Let's keep in touch," Clara suggested, leaning closer. "Absolutely," Jake agreed, his smile widening. "You've made tonight unforgettable." As they exchanged numbers, Clara caught a glimpse of the bellhop watching from afar. He nodded in approval, clearly sensing the connection that had blossomed. With one last glance, Clara and Jake stepped outside into the cool evening air, the lively sounds of the restaurant fading behind them. "I can't believe how much has happened in just a few hours," Clara said, inhaling the fresh air. Jake chuckled. "It's amazing how an unexpected moment can change everything." They stood side by side, two strangers who had come together to share a moment of humanity. In the midst of the swirling chaos of life, they had woven a bond of understanding. As they walked away from the restaurant, Clara felt lighter, stronger. She had broken free from her own constraints, making space for empathy. Jake had reminded her that it's not just about what people wear, but the stories they carry with them. Underneath the city lights, Clara embraced the newfound perspective that had crystallized through their connection. Each encounter held potential, each conversation invited deeper understanding. In that profound moment, it became clear, there is power in kindness, a magic in seeing the unseen, a force that binds us as humans navigating through life. Clara and Jake walked away transformed, two souls who would always remember the night when doors opened and hearts connected. Together, they had participated in rewriting their narratives, leading them toward a future filled with hope. She refused to seat him. The words hung in the air like a thick fog, the din of laughter and clinking glasses fading into silence. Clara stood at the hostess stand, her arms crossed tightly across her chest. The luxurious restaurant behind her radiated charm, with elegant chandeliers casting a soft glow illuminating polished tables adorned with sparkling glassware. But as the man approached, she felt a tightness in her stomach, a sense of obligation mingled with an unsettling feeling of disdain. He looked out of place. Dressed in a frayed t-shirt and worn jeans, his shoes scuffed and dusty, he hesitated at the entrance, eyes scanning the room filled with well-dressed patrons enjoying their evening. Clara's heart raced, and her mind flicked through the familiar routine. Everyone who entered here needed to be perfect, polished. She asked, her voice firm, a practiced edge in her tone. He hesitated, taking a small step forward, and for a moment their eyes locked. "No, but I can pay," he said, his voice soft yet determined, tinged with desperation. Clara's throat tightened. She shook her head. "I'm sorry, but we can't seat anyone without a reservation. Tonight is fully booked," she replied, the words rolling off her tongue with a practiced ease that felt more like an armor than a shield. The man's expression fell, disappointment washing over his face. "I just wanted to grab a bite." "It's been a long day," he said, as if that alone should be enough to earn him a seat at this polished table. A flicker of guilt crossed Clara's mind, but she quickly batted it away. Her job was to protect this space, to uphold its dignity. She glanced at the other guests, all impeccably attired, while he stood there like an outsider, the contrast stark and unsettling. Just then, a bellhop appeared, striding toward them with the confidence of someone used to navigating this opulent world. His uniform was immaculate, and the smile on his face radiated warmth. He exclaimed, addressing the man with a polite familiarity that shocked Clara. "I just wanted to," the man began, but the bellhop cut him off, gesturing toward the dining area with an inviting hand. "Right this way, sir," he said, leading the man away as if he belonged among the elite. Clara's heart dropped. The way the bellhop addressed him, "sir," was almost a bolt out of the blue. She felt a rush of disbelief. What had changed? Why had he been transformed from an insignificant figure to someone deserving of respect? Clara called out, her voice shaky, desperation creeping in. The bellhop turned, his brow raised in confusion. "Everyone deserves a seat," he replied calmly, then continued, guiding the man away. The words echoed in Clara's mind, crashing against her sense of authority. She stood frozen, heart racing. The laughter around her faded, replaced by the whispering doubts script in her mind. How could she have misjudged him so completely? Had she really allowed her preconceived notions to dictate her actions? What kind of person had she become? As her gaze followed the bellhop and the man he had ushered toward a table, Clara felt a cascade of realizations wash over her. She had reduced him to a set of clothes, stripping away his humanity, dismissing what lay beneath the surface. She caught snippets of conversations around her, the privileged laughter masking a world within itself, but Clara felt isolated. This man, Jake, she suddenly remembered his name, was deserving of the same kindness she afforded to every other patron in this restaurant. With gratitude and guilt battling within her, she took a breath and glanced at the guests surrounding her. The comfortable laughter and jovial discussions faded into the background. She willing to stand by and let her errors loom over her. She felt an urgency to act, to correct her earlier mistake. With determination propelling her forward, Clara stepped away from the hostess stand and pushed through the bustling crowd, her heart pounding in rhythm with her steps. She made her way toward the dining area where she could see Jake sitting at a corner table, the bellhop next to him, both laughing. "Excuse me," Clara said as she approached, her voice more timid than she had intended. Jake looked up, surprise washing over his features. she asked, hope mingling with trepidation. Sure, he replied cautiously, an edge of confusion in his eyes. I'm Clara, she introduced herself, extending a hand in greeting, feeling both exposed and hopeful. Jake, he replied, his grip warm, akin to the melting distrust that had built up in Clara's heart. I want to sincerely apologize for how I treated you earlier, she began, her heart racing. I let my assumptions dictate my actions. Jake's expression softened, surprise blending with understanding. Thank you for saying that. Most people wouldn't have the courage to come over and admit they were wrong, he said quietly. Clara felt a wave of relief wash over her. What I realized today is that everyone has their own story just like you. Jake nodded slowly as if contemplating her words. It's easy to judge someone based on appearances, but we all have burdens we carry. A deep silence settled between them, filled with unspoken acknowledgement. Clara felt the weight of her earlier actions begin to lift, replaced by something hopeful and genuine. It was a connection expanding like a delicate thread weaving them together. As they chatted, Clara learned more about Jake's life, his struggles and hidden talents seeping into the conversation. I used to love writing, he said, eyes brightening momentarily. But after losing my job, I put it on hold. Writing can be cathartic, Clara offered. I know, Jake sighed. Before Clara could reply, the bellhop returned, his bright demeanor capturing their attention. He asked, genuinely interested. It's been great, thanks to you, Clara said, her heartfelt gratitude bubbling to the surface. The bellhop smiled, warmth reflected in his eyes. We all deserve kindness, he said simply, then turned his attention back to Jake. Jake grinned, clearly having enjoyed every bite. It's incredible, he said, sounding surprised. Good food, friendly service, it makes all the difference, the bellhop replied. As the bellhop excused himself, Clara turned her focus back to Jake, her excitement palpable. You seem to have a lot of potential with that writing. He chuckled, shaking his head slightly. I haven't had time to even think about it, but now, absolutely, Clara encouraged, leaning slightly forward. You have a voice that deserves to be heard. The connection between them deepened, their conversation flowing effortlessly. The restaurant buzzed around them, but it became background noise, a symphony underscoring their shared moment. What had started as a rocky encounter unfolded into a beautiful exchange of stories and revelations. Jake asked, eyes bright with curiosity. Clara paused, caught off guard by the question. I want to create an atmosphere of warmth within hospitality. Then you're already making a difference tonight, he replied, sincerity painting his words. Their conversations stretched further, uncovering vulnerabilities and hopes, fears and ambitions, the masks they wore peeling away to reveal their raw selves. Clara described her journey in hospitality, the highs and lows, and the struggles that often came with being someone in a position of authority. I think we often forget how interconnected we are, Jake mused. Clara's heart brimmed with gratitude, resonating with his words. That is exactly what I learned. With the meal coming to a close, the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a warm golden glow across their table. The world outside continued to bustle, but inside felt like a realm where only they existed. Jake glanced at his watch, the awareness of time settling upon them. I should probably get going, he said, but his reluctance was clear. I'd love to stay in touch. I want to hear about your writing journey, Clara ventured, her heart swelling at the thought of their connection continuing. Definitely, Jake agreed, the spark of shared excitement igniting. As they swapped numbers, a spark of hope glimmered in Clara's chest. This wasn't just a fleeting encounter, it was the beginning of something meaningful. Just then, the bellhop appeared once more, a glimmer of satisfaction on his face. He asked, glancing between them. More than okay, Clara assured him, feeling the swell of gratitude. I'm just doing my job, the bellhop replied with a shrug, but Clara could see the pride in his eyes. As they ventured back outside, the night air wrapped around them like a soft blanket. The city's bustling noises echoed above, but Clara felt a calmness within. Tonight changed my perspective in so many ways, Jake said, his expression serious yet warm. I came in here feeling like an outsider, and now I feel. Clara smiled, the connection solidifying between them like a beautifully woven tapestry. That is precisely what I hope to create in my role. Thank you for being brave enough to come forward and admit your mistake, Jake said, his gratitude evident in his eyes. It struck Clara how they had each moved beyond judgment, embracing something deeper and more genuine. We're all learning and growing, she replied, feeling the weight lifting from her shoulders. There was a lightness in her heart as they exchanged goodbyes, two souls who had connected amidst judgment and assumptions, finding kinship in shared experiences. The night pulsed with renewed energy, echoing a promise of connection that would not be easily lost. As Clara walked away, she felt a shift within her, a realization of the power of kindness. She had witnessed the transformation of two people meeting within the expectations of a luxurious restaurant. That night had shifted her perspective on humanity as a whole, opening her heart to the stories waiting just beneath the surface. With her head held high, Clara embraced the invitation to see the world through a different lens, a lens filled with empathy, understanding, and a commitment to fostering connections that could transcend appearances. And as Jake disappeared down the street, she knew their paths would cross again. both in the world of hospitality and in the realm of friendship they had begun to create. In moments like these, the truth resonated. Through compassion and understanding, every encounter has the potential to change lives, ignite hope, and remind us that we're all deserving of a seat at the table. In the bustling lobby of a five-star hotel, Clara stood with her arms crossed, her gaze scanning the room like a hawk. The scent of expensive perfume hung in the air, mingling with the faint sound of clattering silverware and cheerful chatter. A majestic chandelier hung above, dripping with crystal, casting a warm glow over polished marble floors. It was a scene of opulence, a world removed from the struggles of everyday life. But then he walked in. He hesitated at the entrance, his worn sneakers and frayed jeans drawing quick turns of heads. Clara watched as he scanned the lavish interior, taking in the sight of well-dressed patrons sipping champagne and enjoying caviar. She felt a knot tighten in her stomach, an instinctual flicker of judgment flaring up inside her. This place was reserved for the elite, and he didn't belong. When he stepped forward, Clara straightened her back, preparing her routine. She asked sharply, his expression shifted, vulnerability etching lines across his face. "No, but I was hoping, I'm sorry, but we can't seat anyone without a reservation," she interrupted, her tone firm. The words felt rehearsed, almost mechanical. She quickly glanced at the guests around her, ensuring her authority remained unchallenged. He opened his mouth to say something, but then closed it again, the weight of her rejection sinking in. "I just wanted to grab something to eat," he muttered, disappointment cracking through his voice, but Clara held her ground. "I really can't help you." She watched as his shoulders slumped, the flicker of hope in his eyes extinguished. Just then a bellhop appeared, adjusting his crisp uniform, a picture of confidence. He approached the man with a warm smile, and Clara felt a surge of panic. The bellhop said cheerfully, addressing the man directly. Clara's heart raced. The word echoed in her mind, crashing against her judgments like waves against a rocky shore. The bellhop's kindness transformed the man in an instant, drawn from the shadows of her assumptions into a figure worthy of respect. "I just wanted to," the man started, but the bellhop smoothly interrupted. He said, leading the man toward the dining area with an air of authority and grace that Clara had failed to offer. What just happened? Clara felt her world tilt on its axis. The man, who had been nothing more than a scruffy figure moments before, now stood tall under the bellhop's treatment. Her gasp escaped before she could catch it, confusion churning in her stomach. Every instinct told her to stop them, to reclaim the authority she believed she had. She cried, her voice catching in her throat. The bellhop turned, eyebrows raised, surprise flickering across his face. "Everyone deserves a seat," he replied, his voice steady, as if the truth of his words could not be questioned. And with that, he continued, leading the man away. Clara stood frozen, the elegant surroundings now suffocating in their grandeur. How had she allowed her judgments to dictate her actions? A thick silence enveloped her, and the muffled laughter and chatter of guests became a distant echo. As she watched the pair disappear into the dining room, uncertainty gnawed at her. Why had she let superficial appearances dictate her understanding of worth? In the world of high-end dining, why had she allowed her bias to overshadow her humanity? A wave of guilt washed over Clara as she witnessed the man's demeanor change, a smile breaking through the initial disappointment. The bellhop had treated him as a valued guest, something Clara had failed to see. Suddenly, she was acutely aware of the chasm that separated her from him, one that her judgments had created. Her thoughts raced. What if he had a beautiful story? What if he had come here not just for food, but for a moment of connection? She had denied him that. The tension in her chest built until she felt like she might burst. Gathering her courage, Clara stepped away from the hostess stand, determination leading her toward the dining area. This couldn't be how it ended. She couldn't let fear and prejudice dictate the course of another person's experience. As she approached the table where the man sat, she could see him chatting with the bellhop, his laughter rising like music in the air. Had he really crossed that invisible line from unworthy to deserving in just a few moments? It was unsettling, forcing Clara to confront her own biases. "Excuse me," she said when she reached them. The man looked up, surprise mingling with caution, and the bellhop stepped back, sensing the tension. Sure," the man replied, confusion still lingering in his eyes. "I'm Clara," she introduced herself, her voice steadying as she extended her hand. "I want to apologize for how I treated you earlier." "Jake," he replied, shaking her hand, lingering on the warmth of the moment. The bellhop smiled faintly, perhaps sensing the connection forming. "I'll leave you both to your conversation," he said, stepping back but lingering nearby like a protective shadow. Clara took a seat, the weight of her initial decision pressing against her. "I can't believe I almost turned you away," she admitted, her heart racing. Jake nodded slowly. "It happens. People can be quick to judge based on appearances." As they spoke, Clara felt the tangled web of her expectations start to unravel. She learned about Jake's life, the struggles he faced after losing his job, a tale of uncertainty and resilience. He shared how he had once dreamed of finding success in a creative field, but life had drawn him away from his passions. For the first time, Clara could see beyond the surface. This was not just a man in worn jeans. This was someone carrying years of hope and heartache, dreams deferred by circumstances. There was a depth in his voice, a story waiting to unfurl. Thought coming here would just be a simple meal, Jake admitted, a small laugh escaping his lips. Clara felt her heart swell with empathy. I realized that every person who walks through those doors carries a unique story. As their conversation deepened, the world around them faded into the background. The laughter of patrons, the clinking of silverware all became mere background noise, overshadowed by the connection they were forging. The bellhop returned once more, checking on them with genuine interest. He asked, beaming as he caught the wave of energy flowing between Clara and Jake. "It's been enlightening, thanks to you," Clara said earnestly, a smile breaking through. The bellhop nodded, clearly proud of his decision to treat Jake with respect. "Exactly," Jake interjected. Clara wanted to dive deeper, to learn more about Jake and what had brought him to this point in his life. She felt the narrative shifting, their connection weaving threads of understanding that sparked excitement within her. Clara asked, recalling Jake's mention of creativity. "I used to write poetry, created entire worlds within my head, but I lost that part of myself," he confessed, revealing the fragility behind his bravado. "Maybe tonight is a fresh start," Clara suggested, her voice filled with encouragement. Jake's eyes sparkled at the thought. "You might be onto something." Suddenly, the restaurant's ambience shifted. The clattering sounds of silverware, energetic conversations, and laughter blended together in a harmonious backdrop. Their moment felt alive and radiant. Clara glanced around, feeling the warmth of shared stories enveloping them. With newfound resolve, Clara leaned in closer, excitement bubbling over. "What if we worked together?" Jake replied, surprise etched across his features. Just then, a commotion erupted nearby. A woman's voice sliced through the laughter, raised in outrage. Clara's attention snapped to the source, her heart racing at the unfolding drama. "What do you mean I can't be seated here?" The woman shouted, a designer handbag swinging from her elbow. She was dressed in high-end clothing, radiating an air of authority and privilege. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but we don't allow reservations to be altered at the last moment," the manager explained, his voice calm but firm. Clara's heart raced as she sensed the tension building. The entire restaurant had fallen silent, all eyes on the escalating scene. She whispered to Jake, watching the escalating situation with trepidation. The woman's face flushed with anger. Clara could hear snickers ripple through the crowd, nerves dancing in the air. She could sense that the smile-filled ambience of the restaurant was now overshadowed by anxiety. But then something unexpected happened. The bellhop stepped forward, standing tall. "Excuse me, ma'am." Silence enveloped the room, the tension thick. Clara looked at Jake, feeling the weight of the moment. The woman's composure began to falter as she absorbed the bellhop's depth of conviction and the collective focus of the room. Clara's breath caught in her throat, adrenaline surging through her. Clara looked at Jake, whose wide eyes mirrored her own. This was a watershed moment, a pivotal turning point that blurred the lines of privilege and worth. Feeling a spark of courage, Clara spoke up. "Yes, we are more than our status." Around them, whispers began to ripple through the restaurant, people nodding in agreement, feeling emboldened by the unexpected alliance forming. The atmosphere shifted, almost palpable. The woman seemed taken aback, vulnerability flickering behind her steely exterior as she felt the collective gaze of the restaurant weigh on her. Moments felt like hours as she slowly lowered her bag, a realization washing over her. "You're right," she mumbled, the fight leaving her voice. The bellhop stepped forward, extending a hand of goodwill. As the woman finally nodded, the tension broke and a wave of relief washed through the restaurant. Clara turned back to Jake, realization dawning upon her like the rising sun. "Tonight is changing everything," she said softly, fingers trembling. But the echoes of the previous encounter had yet to fully settle, and just as the laughter began to return, an unexpected figure entered the scene. At the entrance stood a man in a sharp suit, briefcase in hand, scanning the room for someone. Clara's breath caught in her throat as the electricity in the air shifted yet again. She whispered to Jake, both of them curious and apprehensive. Jake squinted in the dim light. They watched as the man approached, his gaze zeroing in on the bellhop and the previously angry woman. The tension grew thick, a whisper of dread threading through the room. Just as the man reached the table, he suddenly raised his voice. "There you are." But the look in his eyes shattered the joyful atmosphere, an unmistakable spark of authority and possessiveness. Clara's heart raced as they stepped closer, the pivotal moment in this unfolding drama leading to uncertainty. She could sense that whatever was about to happen would change everything. The atmosphere crackled with unspoken tensions, questions hanging heavily in the air, and the realization that perhaps all was not yet resolved. The echoes of urgency lingered, and Clara could feel the weight of what lay ahead. Would the night take a turn for the better, or was this the harbinger of yet another storm? One look between Jake and Clara confirmed it. Their stories were just beginning, but danger lurked just beyond the horizon.